Welcome to r/JustNoHOA, where people tell stories about their crazy homeowner associations. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. New HOA President is threatening me for following state law, I think. So I am a volunteer firefighter in the state of Ohio. I live in an area on the edge of town which is owned, I think that's the right word, by a HOA. Now, as a volunteer firefighter, I am authorized by state law and my chief to run lights and sirens to calls and the station. As far as I am aware from the class I took, this was several years ago, state law requires me to be using sirens whenever my emergency lights are on. The HOA bylaws prohibit loud noise between 10 PM and 6 AM Monday to Saturday and 9 PM to 8 AM on Sunday. It also prohibits overly loud vehicles. Luckily, our previous president was awesome about my role and we came to an agreement that if I was called out, I would activate my lights and sirens as I left the HOA area, which was at the main road less than a block from my house. He also said he would see about getting an exemption for people like me into the bylaws, but as far as I am aware, that never happened. A month ago, a new HOA president was elected after the old one moved away. Since then, he has been enforcing the bylaws with a passion. Up until now, I have not had a problem by following my previous agreement with the former president, but on Sunday at about 6 AM, a cardiac arrest was toned out at the address of one of our former volunteer chiefs, who was an awesome and highly respected guy, but that is not really relevant. As you can imagine, everyone responded to that, including me. I also had a moment of forgetfulness and put my lights and sirens on from my driveway and hauled ass through our 20 miles per hour zone to get out to the main road. Unfortunately, this goes straight past our new president's house on the edge of the HOA area. When I returned from the call, I was in a bit of a state as unfortunately we were unable to revive our former chief. I was met by the president who handed me notice of fines for violating the quiet hours, having an overly loud vehicle and speeding. As you can imagine, I was not happy, and to be honest, I got a bit aggressive with him and told him where he could shove it. In response to this, he said if he saw my vehicle out, he would clamp it for being in violation of the noise bylaw, and then after 24 hours it would be towed. He also said he would send the fines to collections. My question is, can he do any of this since I am just following state law? Also, if he interferes with my vehicle while I am on call and I need to go quickly, is he obstructing emergency services? I did ask my chief about this and he said he would get back to me, but I am worried he may do it as soon as today. Since this was posted on r/legal advice, we are gonna read the top comment as well. This was posted by Der Spiny. The word is governed. A HOA is effectively a form of petty governance. Most are even elected from the constituency. Now, on the one hand, rules, lawyering busybodies are a normal part of HOA life and you will never be 100% rid of them. On the other hand, the HOA's authority is subordinate to the surrounding government's authority. Splitting the difference, I think you're doing the best you can on your own if you're keeping the lights and sirens off until you leave the HOA's property. However, you are a firefighter, you're not all by yourself. I assume you're supervised by and empowered by your city administration. Your authority to use emergency lights does not spring from nowhere. You should kick this up the chain. Telling your supervisor that your HOA is fining you for using your emergency lights will likely lead to a swift and comprehensively loyally knock that crap off letter to your HOA. In short, you did the right things. Don't fret the timing, none of this is going to be fast. In the interim, keep saving lives until your supervisor tells you otherwise. If the HOA claims your vehicle, call the police. I gotta say, that is one part of the story that I did not really understand. I mean, sure, it's definitely a kind of petty fine the HOA is giving, but why does the guy need to turn on the sirens as he is still in his driveway? But maybe that's a rule or something. Either way, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments, and now let's continue. Leave me alone, HOA, I don't want to buy a new car right now. I am currently renting a townhome and have been here with no problems for about 5 months. On Thursday, I received a letter from the local HOA essentially stating that we are no longer allowed to park vehicles outside if they are older than 10 years old. Non-compliance will result in a $100 fine per vehicle. Vehicles will be towed after the third violation at the owner's expense. I drive a 2001 Honda Accord and don't have a garage, so this is a bit problematic for me. I have looked over my 12-month lease agreement and there is a fairly generic looking clause that lists the name and address of the HOA and states, "Tenant agrees to abide by any applicable owners association regulations as they now exist or may be amended." I don't really feel like spending the money on a new vehicle right now when mine works just fine. I guess I could break my lease, but I'm pretty sure that has some not so fun credit and rental history implications. Do I really have to spend a couple of thousands on a new vehicle? What to do? What would you guys recommend OP to do in that situation? Judging by the comments, the only thing I've heard so far is that he should talk to the landlord and let him know about the situation. But apparently the HOA is indeed able to change the rules however they want, because another person said that the HOA can change rules without grandfathering anything. By the way, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. Thank you so much, your support really means the world to me. HOA stole my mom's money. My mom has been living in her hometown for a good 15 years or so. Recently, she and her neighbors discovered that the treasurer for the HOA has neglected to pay the water bill. Everyone in the neighborhood is now several thousands of dollars behind and could lose their homes if it is not paid. My mom was advised that she would most likely be owed the money back if she were to sue, but rumor has it the treasurer lost all the money to a drug habit and the HOA would never be able to pay it back. She and a few other neighbors tried to get everyone together to start a lawsuit, but enthusiasm is low due to several factors. Lawsuits cost money and no one thinks they will get a return on their investment. Many of the residents are renters and are not interested in this dispute. Most of the owners in the neighborhood are elderly and don't have the energy to fight for it. One of the elderly neighbors who has been there as long as I can remember and has decided to sell her home and move in with her daughter, partially due to this issue. It just does not seem right. Is there anything my mom can do on her own or with a couple of other neighbors that does not come with such a big financial risk? At this time, this person is still working for the HOA and the fees have not changed. They are completely ignoring the issue, presumably, until they are forced to do otherwise. My mom also has concerns about other practices that seem shady and predatory towards the older members of the community. General advice concerning these matters are welcome as well. What do you guys think about this story? Is it possible to get completely rid of that HOA? What would you do if you were in OP's shoes? Someone in the comments mentioned that you should get the FBI involved and report embezzlement. It's not possible to get rid of the HOA in a townhouse situation, but you can probably kick out the people running it and form a new board. Unfortunately, in regards to this comment, I'm not really sure what embezzlement means. Maybe someone can clarify that in the comments. My HOA are incompetent scum. My father stalks them until they resign. So I live in a relatively new suburban neighborhood with a homeowners association, HOA, that has been slowly getting more annoying. My father, a paranoid, vengeful Republican, retired civil engineer, is the main disperser of the revenge. Here is a list of their earlier offenses. First, about 5 years ago, they sent us a notice to move our garbage bins out of the street and that if they were left outside of the backyard after garbage day for too long again, they would fine us. Our garbage bins were not in the street. We were also very good about putting our garbage bins away promptly after they sent us a warning after we left them out during a week-long vacation. They somehow mixed up our house with our neighbors. My dad spray painted our lot number on the bins so this would not happen again. The rest of the neighborhood slowly followed suit. From what I hear, the security guard the HOA hired is also paid to look for infractions on each lot, but apparently is not paid enough to get the lot numbers right, so this happened several times. Second, the light on our address number has not worked since the house was built. We bought immediately after it was finished because the construction job was rather shoddy. 6 years later, somebody from the HOA finally noticed and told us we had to pay to fix it, even though it was due to an electrical fault on the part of the builders. They also demand a picture to prove we fixed it. My father opened the box where the light was, put a glow stick in and took a picture at night and sent it in. The address light seemingly fixed. They bought it. Number 3, they tried to force all members of the neighborhood into this poorly designed social network for our neighborhood. Nobody liked it and the network was barely used even by the HOA. Not announcing HOA meetings except a day or two before the meeting by posting the times on a dilapidated board at the park at the center of the neighborhood. The paper often falls off and blows away, so the meetings were not often attended by anybody until recently because of the big offense that follows. Here is the big one that set my dad off. There's apparently a clause in the HOA guidelines that every so often we must have the house repainted. The first time to do this came up last year. There was a lot of crappy bureaucracy involved, like having to submit a request to do the mandated painting. And then the whole neighborhood was mandated to use these expensive, not particularly good paints that could not be bought anywhere except from a posh, overpriced supplier some 100 miles away. My father, being a cheapskate, said F it and got a small-time guy, real friendly, to do the job on the cheap and use paints that were one tone off but were more durable and cheaper because they could be bought in bulk from the big store down the street. He does a great job in just 2 hot summer days, doing all the work with just him and, I believe, 2 others, all on the cheap. A few months later, when everybody else was repainting their houses, we get a notice that our house is not painted according to code and submit a new request to repaint our house or face penalties. My dad was steaming because he was pretty sure the only reason they required us to use those colors was because the paint company was paying them to and the house looked great. He endured months of poorly managed bureaucracy. He kept sending the requests to repaint the house and they kept playing around, losing the request, not keeping him notified of the matter, delaying the processing until it neared the deadline to paint the house. If we overshot the deadline, we would be fined. He demanded that they just fine him bribe for using the wrong paint and not force him to repaint with the overpriced crap paint. They wanted to make an example of us and have him come before a disciplinary committee. My father would not let this stand. While they kept playing bureaucratic games, my father started his revenge games. He got somebody in the HOA to tell him where the offices of their management was and went there to demand to speak with them, to complain and ask for information on the proceedings. Because it was so far out of the way and hard to figure out where it was and he made such a fuss, they panicked. He went again a week later and they had beefed up security and denied him entry unless he had an appointment. When he met with the disciplinary committee, there was an armed security guard there. My father pulled out all his know-how as a civil engineer and told them that the paint they were using was subpar, overpriced, and it was clear that they had no experience in the field and needed a consultant. They politely declined his services and tried to get him to pin all the blame on the painter, which he refused to do as he authorized the painter to cheap out on the paint. As punishment, they force us to repaint in a different, much uglier color that is completely out of place for the neighborhood and was apparently designed for a completely different location. We give in, but my father won't let this go without them knowing never to F with him again. He starts calling/emailing them regularly to demand to know when the next HOA meeting is and berate them for not properly notifying the neighborhood by email or even regular mail/newsletters. Pretty sure this is a violation of their regulations, but they might be just barely fulfilling them with the half-assed posting the day before meetings mentioned earlier. He then starts attending every meeting and recording them. I join him and pretend to be unrelated to make it appear that more people were upset with them. Turns out they had been pissing off people all over the neighborhood, including refusing to let a family dispose of a deceased tree, ruining their lot. I don't recall all the details, but I think the tree was not actually on their property, but rather an empty lot or a condemned lot next door, but it was damaging their garden and property. Doing nothing to deal with a hornet nest on a block set of mailboxes, the mailboxes are all set up in one conjoined block of boxes that was causing the mail person to refuse to deliver the mail there, causing people to miss bills and important mail, forcing at least 2 other houses who did the same as us to repaint in crappy colors. My dad met with these people and gathered their contact info. We had planned to organize with other angry neighbors to stage a coup once elections came around. After the first meeting, my father took the information he had gathered on the people in charge of the HOA, took to the internet and found much more. The second meeting he goes to, he shows with name placards for all of them so the neighborhood could know not only their names and positions, they could not be bothered to do this themselves, but also their addresses and phone numbers, letting them know he knows who they are and where they live. This on top of his harassment by email and phone and at their office, to the point they had hired security guards to protect them from an angry old gun-owning man. Must have been too much for this group of 30-something soccer moms. The next meeting, there is new HOA people. The president, vice president and half the board have resigned. Turns out they were all a clique that used the HOA as more of a social club than a serious thing. My father is satisfied and the new board starts taking action to actually help people in the neighborhood. You know guys, after hearing all these HOA stories, I gotta say, home ownership does not really seem to be a thing that I would want if I live in the US. By the way, what is your opinion on renting apartments versus buying homes? Where I am from, most people cannot afford to buy a home, but I know that most people have this goal in their life to own their own house. For me, that's not really the case because I like the freedom to live wherever I want, but as I said, I'm curious to hear your opinion. Tow a resident? Make the drop of shame and lose your contract. This is a story about being a good neighbor, an HOA that is actually not evil, and a towing company that is. This literally just concluded moments ago. I live in like a little gated community thing with townhomes and stuff and a HOA, nothing super fancy by any means, just a quiet little neighborhood. The way it works with parking and the crux of this story is that every resident has 2 spots assigned to their unit and they are yours to do with as you see fit. Use them, leave them empty, let your neighbor use it, let guests use it, park straddling both spots, who cares? They are yours, it's been this way for many years with nary an issue. We have a towing company contracted to the HOA. Now our tow company is only here to be called as a residence or HOA direct request to remove an unauthorized vehicle from their spot. The parking is numbered, but just to identify the spots safe for residents, everyone gets 2, as we don't have any numbered, assigned window stickers or anything that's serious. The towing contract is rarely used and really even then just as a last resort, we usually just talk to each other like good neighbors do if we have a parking or other issue. So I get home this evening and right behind me comes a tow truck. The kind they use for stealth pulls where they lift up one axle and roll you on down the road about 20 seconds after arrival. As I get out of my car, I see them pulling a neighbor's car who always parks diagonally in their 2 spots due to a tight configuration and a corner spot, making it difficult to navigate even small cars in and out while parking within the lines. Now again, it's their spots, so who cares? Literally nobody. That's who. I could not shake the feeling that something was off. You see, the couple that owns the car is a sweet little couple in their 60s, semi-retired and generally just nice, quiet people. It did not seem likely to me that their car was being repossessed, and something about the tow truck driver and his either spotter or manager, some random dude in a F-150 following him around on a radio, just made me feel odd. Usually I'm a pretty non-confrontational person, but something about the whole situation made me act in an uncharacteristically assertive manner, and so I flagged down the driver as he was beginning to leave with the resident's car. I will be G, he will be TT for tow truck. G: hey, are you pulling a repo or a resident out of their own spot? TT: I'm pulling a resident for parking in 2 spots. G: that's bullcrap, I've lived here a decade and that's never been a thing. TT: yeah, well, it's in the contract, you should try reading it. G: no, I've literally talked to the HOA about exactly this and they have confirmed what you are towing them for is explicitly not a towable thing unless the resident themselves called it in. And I doubt they asked you to tow their own car. Well, you should talk to them then, because I'm leaving with it. Gee, cool, see you in an hour. So in comes the revenge. In a stroke of righteous karma, the HOA rep who is responsible for the tow company contract of our complex got home less than 5 minutes after the tow truck left and I was out walking my dogs. I walked up to him, exchanged the usual pleasantries and relayed the situation as well as the fact that they had tagged at least 3 other vehicles in the immediate vicinity for future tows. He simply let out an exasperated "Oh crap," and said he would get on it. I then knocked on the neighbor's door whose car got towed and informed them of the situation as it stood, suggesting they also contact the HOA rep up the hill. They did so accordingly and he confirmed that he was already in the process of handling it. We stood out front and chatted for a bit and he went inside. I retreated to my front porch and waited for what I knew was coming. 20 minutes later, as I leaned against the wall out front, I hear the jingle-jangle of victory coming back into the complex. The tow truck drops the car diagonally in both spots, just as he found it with a scowl on his face. As he leaves, we make eye contact. I grin, he gives me the finger as he leaves, I smile because he knows I won. The neighbor whose car was again parked came outside shortly thereafter and we chatted again briefly. The HOA rep, whose swift action ensured their car was back in the spot exactly 1 hour from the time it was towed, came down to where we were chatting and apologized for the issue, saying that the towing company has given them other problems recently and that with this he would be moving at next month's board meeting to contract with a new company as of January 1st. One that actually abides by what we pay them to do, which definitely is not towing ourselves. In closing, be the good neighbor Mr. Rogers taught you to be. I have to admit the thought of towing your neighbor's car is actually very tempting. As I have mentioned in the past, we have a designated parking spot we are paying monthly and there is a neighbor who basically has his own business and he got around 5 cars, and even though this is a residential area, he presumably thinks that this is an industrial park. That guy basically parks within centimeters of our parking spot and it gets pretty annoying. Did you guys recently have any issues with your neighbors? Let us know in the comments. Harass me and mine go to jail. Many years ago I bought a house in a neighborhood with a very restrictive HOA, however the property I bought pre-existed the HOA and was not included in the HOA or restricted in any way. One of my neighbors seemed to take great offense at the fact that I was not part of the HOA and did not have to abide by the overly restrictive rules. From the time that I moved into the house, he started giving me grief. First, it was HOA notices that I was under no obligation to follow. When that failed, he began to harass me at every opportunity. For months on end, this guy would call in noise complainants anytime I had guests over, no party, just guests. He also habitually called in code complainants and generally harassed me and my family in many other ways. For months he made my life hell. Finally, one night while friends were visiting, we got a knock at the door. It was a police officer responding to another noise complaint. WTF, we were just sitting around playing cards. This was the last straw. I decided to get him back. I formulated a plan. First, you must understand that this was about 30 years ago, there were no cell phones in general use and the average citizen did not have access to the easy communications that we enjoy today. Or my plan would have never worked. I have been into radio my whole life, so my car and house were well equipped with two-way radios. Next, it was fortuitous that my house was in a development that had only one road in or out. Also, there was a convenience store on the corner that always had plenty of cars in the lot for me to blend in with. We put our plan into action on a Friday night. We established an alibi with a close friend in town who would swear that we were at his house playing cards all night. Next, I opened the windows and placed my speakers for my sound system up in the windows facing my neighbor's house. We then cleared a hiding place in a closet with a clear view of the driveway. I then got in my car and drove to the store parking lot and found a spot that gave me a clear view of all cars entering or leaving the development. Once we established that communications were good, it was the hour. My wife turned on the stereo to rock music at full volume, rattling the neighborhood. Also, every light in the house went on. The music was so loud I could hear it at the store over half a mile away. We waited. Sure enough, in about 30 minutes a police car turned into the development. I radioed my wife. Working together, she and her sister quickly turned off the stereo, pulled the speakers from and closed the windows, turned off the lights and then quickly hid in the closet. The police arrived, pulled in the driveway and found an apparently empty and dark house. Windows closed, doors locked, curtains open, lights off, driveway empty. My wife and her sister sat silently in the closet while the officers knocked on doors, shined flashlights in windows and walked completely around the house. Eventually, they decided the house was empty and left. I watched them exit the development and head back towards town. We waited about 30 minutes and repeated the procedure. Windows open, speakers up, stereo on full blast, lights on. About 15 minutes passed before the police returned. I radioed my wife, windows closed, speakers down, lights off. Once again, the police went to my house. They tried every door and spent more time looking in the windows. They even sat in the car out front for about 20 minutes before leaving. About 15 minutes after, they disappeared towards town. We repeated the whole procedure once again. This time it was less than 5 minutes before the police returned. This time they had their blue lights on. Oh crap! The police pulled into my empty driveway but immediately backed out and went to my jerk neighbor's house. They were there for more than 30 minutes. My wife could not hear everything that was said, but there was shouting and cursing. Eventually, the police left, my wife radioed me and I returned home. 2 days later, my neighbor's name appeared in the local newspaper as having been charged with misuse of police resources, filling a false report or something like that. I don't remember the exact charges. Hey, it has been 3 decades ago. But after that night, I never received another complaint, visit from the city or police as the result of him. And the other harassments stopped. Has one of your neighbors ever called the police on you? I'm glad that never happened to me, but I have to say that I would be kind of scared if the police shows up like 5 times at my house if I were to live in America. But then again, props to the OP for standing up against this bully. Either way guys, unfortunately this has to be the last story for today. I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you did, please don't forget to subscribe and also leave me some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. But anyway, I hope you have a fantastic day and I see you again tomorrow. Hey guys, this is Ripe again from the future. A loyal viewer of mine named Mariah Rock, or Maria, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, told me that it is her 21st birthday today, so I would just like to say happy birthday Mariah. I hope you have a fantastic day and I wish you all the best. By the way, if anyone else wants birthday shoutouts, let me know in the comments. I am happy to do so. But anyway guys, that's it for today. Thanks for listening.